Okay, here's the situation. We live in a world of the seen and the unseen. Obviously, that's always been true. There's the visible and the not so visible. There might even be the downright invisible. Who knows? Those are metaphysical questions worthy of exploration in their own right. The issue is, first of all, what's my motivation? Why am I even attempting this? I've already said that I know very well that there may be covert topologies which block out information from a sender to a receiver, and also that block out information to receivers from various senders. So I can be blocked. It can be blocked at the source or at the destination end of the signal. Also, it can all be filtered through a third party. What do you think fusion centers are? What do you think hacking attempts and successful hackings are? They're basically it's an infiltration of a third party. You know, I tell these people this way in a way that sounds, look, you're supposed to be grown-ups, right? Look, I'm 40 years old. And it shouldn't matter how old I am, but I'm really too old. I don't really have time for you people. You know, when I was young, I was working on my own things. I wasn't trying to hurt anybody. I was just trying to, study and learn about the truth of the world in which I lived. I had a disagreement with the religious upbringing that I had. I went my own way. They couldn't be rational about it. They were a cult, okay? I found out that the world's full of cults. I found out that, in fact, the history of the world's culture is one massive brainwashing, mind control operation. As Thrasymachus would put it, culture is whatever is in the interests of the stronger. And, of course, the medieval ages and the imperial ages of the world all demonstrate this outright. Why should this age suddenly be different? Okay, what was the Enlightenment? Before going into a historical thesis about all of this that I'm going to discuss later, because what I'm going to get into is psychotronics, so just file that away, is that basically the entire world is understood to be a system of control. With or without any intentionality involved, there's always cause and effect. There's determinism. There's the consistency of physical laws. And then if you want to consider the idea of liberty, even in the sense that Hume presented it, where it's simply the relative freedom that you have in your capacity to act as you would naturally, in all the ways that encompasses, including mental, physical, emotional, all the aspects of your thinking, everything that seems like a deliberate choice. All these things are culminations of natural capacities within the person that, as Thomas Hobbes would put it, were impressed into action because they were predestined to act in that way, in the same way that a machine with springs and coils and pulleys and levers and other mechanisms would, if only the proper stimulus were applied. In other words, there's a logical sense to the way we function, and we predict our own functions. Mentally, we know it's true that we rely on the capacity of the body to do many things automatically, which once took all of our might to even comprehend were things that we were supposed to be able to do, such as language. To learn that in a firm way, just learn a new language. You're automatically thrown into the swimming pool without knowledge of how to swim, although you have some inkling of it. Because there's nothing about your former language in some cases that will really help you much in your new one, except that you know you're learning a language, whereas a child, to whatever degree its instincts do apply, doesn't have the full conscious appreciation of this as much as an adult does. But it's actually far easier for them, interestingly enough, but that's another topic. The point is that the systems of control exist naturally one way or another. Now let's take the human level of determined action. Call it human action to distinguish it from all the other determined actions that we take to be rather mechanical by comparison to our own. Let's look at the culture as a whole. There is a certain kind of habitual nature to our customs and traditions, the institutions and the status quo of all kinds, including all the things that we take for granted have a certain, are in some way subject to our liberty to choose to do them otherwise, or to reject doing them at all, or to do something that we had never considered doing before, or just to explore and see what happens. Experimentation, discovery, invention, realization, All these things grow out of these potentials. Looking at the world as it is, it's got a lot that we don't like about it. Just bear witness to the conflict in the world. Bear witness to the absurdities many people go on and on about prolifically, and in many cases rightly, and for good reason, and with everyone's interests at heart in some cases, and not just as a form of ranting. That was never my inclination. To get back to my motives, that's never been my inclination. At first, my inclination was to understand what was going on, to study, to learn. I was the humblest person you had ever met, honestly. People accuse me of being arrogant because they're stupid. They don't know about the 40 years of my life before they met me. They have no idea how I grew up, what I went through, how many books I've read, how many people I've spoken with, how many discussions I've had with how many people to find out just what was going on in this or that domain or area of concern. Just naturally what someone would do if they were being honest. It was the Socratic method combined with the Platonic impulse, basically. But it's the same, and then it became self-consciously so, because it became more fruitful to actually read tomes of philosophy than discuss the subject matter with people. And in some cases, I had no idea that that's what I was doing. It was just a curiosity about this or that and an attempt to understand it. I met with a lot of resistance in these areas, not even understanding what it was. And believe me, there is a gulf of difference in the way I express myself now and the way I did then. I express myself with authority, and even in a let's just say a more controlled tone that would sound more palatable to some ears. I don't think it's the loudness of the voice or the tone of it that is so off-putting. I think it's just that some people don't like to hear the truth, and they like to hear things candy-coated in a certain way, no matter what it is. They like their truth like they like their lies, candy-coated. Well, I don't have time for that. Like I said, it's never been my inclination to go out and preach to people or teach people or talk to people. It's always been my inclination to study, to absorb, to learn, and to do so with as few other human participants as possible. Very introverted. If Carl Jung were here right now, he would tell you that. So people do a lot of projection because most of them are extroverts. Most of them have very shallow perceptions of other people that are based on their own ready-to-hand stereotypical images that they like to project. So I run into that a lot because I did not ever get into the habit of sculpting, as Epimetheus would, an appearance that would mesh well with what I expected other people's responses would be. And that's not going to ever become my habit. I'm not interested in it. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to convey information to the people I think would benefit from hearing it, or if I need to communicate to accomplish some task in the world. It's just naturally what I do. I don't take pleasure from the banter and the back and forth and the nuances. I don't. I have to be around people I really like and enjoy on a personal level to relax into that kind of temperament. It doesn't mean I can't. It's just that I don't do that casually, and I don't do it frequently, and I don't do it voluminously, okay? So that's where I'm coming from in my personal expressions. I was talking, I was commenting on a website. It's called Zen Gardener's Just Wondering or whatever. His name's Alex something or other, but it's also my first name, and that's also several other notable people that I might mention their first names. So it's very interesting how that works, but in such a small circle of interests. But this guy, he's pretty much a jerk. He's basically the kind of guy you just take off your gloves, slap him across the face, and get down to business. He wants to play the passive-aggressive game of he's so spiritual and his new age pomposity, and I just go in there and sometimes I'll see something and I just have to comment on it because he's talking about subject matter which is of my specific interest, such as archontic entities, issues that are brought up in the realm of discussion of Gnostic ideas and traditions, and many, and I take that in the broadest sense, many traditions of thought about what kind of world we live in. He likes to come in with his heavy-handed, passive-aggressive, leave your ego at the door attitude because he can't handle someone having a different position and stating it the way I do. He's the tone police. Okay, I run into the tone police a lot. Let me tell you something, tone police. Go fuck yourselves. Go fuck yourselves. You want to adjust this? We can find us a place, an enclosed space, sign some legal waivers, and let's see you do it then. Make it a paid event. fuck you. This is more important than how you feel about my tone. The subject that I'm addressing, in this case, is psychotronics. I didn't want to have to intro it like that, but look, let's just blast through some bullshit. I'm not here for you, and you're not here for me. Everyone in this world is here for themselves, including if it's just for their own families, and there's nothing altruistic about that. That's totally selfish. Everybody on this planet is... Now, empathy and those feelings transcend the barrier of the ego, but it's still selfish. It's in your nature to love those people close to you. You're obeying your own nature. What could be more selfish than that? Let's just let's just cut through that bullshit once and for all. I was interested in the phenomena of the world as I understood it in a naive sense when I was much younger. Coming to see what was underneath and the underbelly of all this was disconcerting to me. It took decades to fully get used to the idea of what was going on while it was going on and being accelerated by forces out of my control and about which I knew nothing. Like everybody, well, not like everybody else, but like a lot of people. I took a different approach. I wanted to handle some personal issues, so I went a longer route to finding out some of this information. It wasn't because I was resisting it. It's because it wasn't apparent to me. It can seem strange at first to encounter a phenomenon that you don't understand simply because it was never habitually presented to you. Just as an infant does not pick up on language like that, a 17-year-old who barely has had a few jobs doesn't pick up on the notion that fiat money or fiat currency isn't really even necessarily money. It's a promissory note. It's a statement of a debt. You can't pay money. You can't pay money through that. Exchanging debt? That's not even, you haven't even reached the level of money yet. Just IOUs. Well, look, it still operates as currency. It still operates as money. It functions as money, yeah, because goods and services are exchanged through it. But whenever some guy's telling me, I honestly thought he needed, I didn't really think he needed to put a tinfoil hat on. I just didn't understand what he was saying. He was telling me, look, this is a Federal Reserve note. He's trying to explain, it's funny money, it's monopoly money. I'm like, well, you can buy a pizza with it, so how is it not real? You know, people will give you something in exchange for it. He was trying to teach me about the nature of fractional reserve banking and counterfeit fiat money, which is printed over and above what would be the appropriate amount or under what would be the appropriate amount for an economy to have. And the mechanisms by which they get away with doing this are as complex as the subject of economics. It's a bunch of arcane gobbledygook specifically designed to rationalize a scam. That doesn't mean there isn't a subject called economics that could be properly, I mean, you could get books from Ludwig von Mises, or you could read a lot of the libertarian material that's out there, or that refers to the Austrian School of Economics as one example. And there's still a lot of work to be done in that system. But to address even some critical issues, I'm going to have to put that aside and just glance right over that, because it's just to make the point that at the time that he was trying to tell me this, there was just no way that was going to fit into my worldview. I tried. I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. I tried to give my own family and their religions, well, they were all converted to one religion. I tried to give other people the benefit of the doubt, because in our religion it was required of us to preach. I tried to give their position the benefit of the doubt, where they said I was supposed to do this to demonstrate my my devotion to the spiritual truths that we supposedly believed in. All the while, I was struggling with the basic theology of the problem, to which the functionary priests could not address, and they just showed me contempt for asking the question. Basically, when people find their ignorance is challenged by somebody, their ego kicks into gear, and if they want to play guru, what they do is they tell you to leave your ego at the door. That's their fucking mind game. And I'm not playing that game. People that do it, they always try to do it in a situation where they think they have the environmental locus of control. You're on their website, you're in their car, you're in their cabin, you're in their house, you're in their basement, and they got you chained up against a fucking wall. Whatever the situation is, you're in their society, you're in their country, whatever the circumstance is, the ego kicks in and goes, oh, look, I don't have to put up with the emotional pain of being proven wrong. That's an abstract thing. The first thing to go when the brain dies are the reasoning centers in the frontal lobes and in the capacity to process language. It's just like a fish rots from the head down. A brain rots from the front back, and so does the corpse from the head down too. Basically, the most complicated, delicate, and functions of the mind, which are furthest removed from the senses, are the first to go while the person is still alive and while the structures still function. But whenever they're impeded by, say, an emotion abruptly coming up because you can't handle the pain of being proven of having your whole worldview basically shattered by a few logical arguments that just shattered. Instead of looking at that and going, whoa, and grappling with it for as long as it takes, what most people do is they just react to it, balk at it, and they try to rationalize and socialize the exchange of information. They try to turn it into a commodity of a power struggle between two wills because they're goddamn idiots. That's not how anything was properly accomplished in the world that required true understanding of facts and valid understanding of how causes lead to effects. So I've quite had it up to here with these New Age guru idiots who promote their blissful obliviousness to the urgency of addressing matters of moral and concrete significance in our world with their platitudes about how in their little head, you know, they're the frog at the bottom of the well that just sees this little bit of the sky and it looks just fine and blue to them. They don't see all the clouds amassing, the storm clouds, the tornadoes, the hurricanes, or anything coming on the horizon. That's not real to them. That's your problem. Everybody's got their own truth, their own little well. To use a Taoist a story pertinent to this matter. The fox or whatever animal that was on top of the well knew that it was hopeless to reach the little frog at the bottom of the well. That's how the New Age fools look to me. And of course, what do but project? Just like the little bird does flying from tree to tree when it sees the pung bird. Because that's the difference between their ignorance on the subject of morality and metaphysics and what world they live in and mine, frankly. And I'm not here with the kid gloves. Now, all they do whenever I just make a simple argument, I don't come out with that. I just make a simple, clean, objective argument in any context to someone who's just, you know, rambling on about their New Age delusion, for example, and I just put in a few surgically placed ideas in about a paragraph. This idiot that wants to play shepherd over everyone else's tone and mentality comes in and answers for this guy and tries to berate me and tell me I need to leave my ego at the door and what a problem I've got. You know, the arrogance of all that projection coming through someone who's about, I don't know, 15, 20 years older than me, and he can't wrap his head around basic things like logic. You know, piss on that fool. There are a lot of fools that make it to that age and think themselves wise. And there are a few that can actually back that claim up with some evidence. And he's not one of them. But naturally, the projection process comes through. The person can't be aware of the little tunnel they're living in. They can't come out of it. And then so the first thing they do is go into ad hominem attacks. They attack the person. They project their fantasies of what you are and where you're coming from based on their interpretation of your tone. A rich theater of psychoanalysis in itself, how you interpret and take things, right? And then, while doing that, they richly lace it with projection so deeply that every single thing they're accusing you of is exactly what they're doing. It's amazing. I'm astounded by how consistent this defense mechanism is. Freud was thoroughly right to treat it with so much attention, as were all the other psychoanalysts. and psychologists and psychiatrists back whenever they had a semi-scientific basis for their profession. There was actually, it's an astounding phenomenon that's rooted deeply in the nature of aggression and the defense of the organism from its environment, as well as in its need to seek stimulus that might lead to its being its situation being improved, or a danger being averted, or finding food, or a mate, and all these things. Human communication, all of the human levels of biology grow out of the root mechanisms that are their foundation, which are analogous to that of all the other animals you see in the world. If you want to call them lower, you could, but they're basically us in a more rudimentary form, much more rudimentary form in some cases. In addressing the issue of projection in cases like this, there's nothing I can do. You know, it's like the little bird basically flittering from tree to tree, and then it sees the pung bird whose wings stretch from one horizon to the other. 10,000 feet up, going from one pole to the other, and that's its one flight, and it takes decades for it to gather the wind that it requires. I mean, this is a different process than what this little guy's used to. So what can he do? How can he digest this thing? It's like a I don't know, a small hyena or a jackal trying to devour an elephant. You know, he's just got to take his time and do it real slow. I don't have time for that kind of nonsense. You know, if someone's ego is so invested in their pretenses of knowledge about important matters like morality, truth, justice, reality, culture, spirituality, if they're going to have this little tunnel they want to live in, okay, but I reserve the right, whenever they're presenting themselves and they're gallivanting around on the internet like they're the big guru, and when websites like Renz.com snap them up and just basically graffiti their headlines page with links to these kinds of fools, it's a commons of ideas. If they're so awesome and right, then I can go in there and state a few arguments, and they should be able to shoot those arguments down with logic instead of being the tone police. Zero logic, zero honesty, full-blown projection, absolute arrogance and hypocrisy. But that's what I predicted. I wasn't even going on there to butt heads with that fool, Zen Gardner, as I call him. I was actually interested in the subject, and then I read the article. I thought the article and his interpretation were bogus, because they actually go right to the precipice of facing the reality of evil in its ontological form and then dismissing it as a subset of our projections. Well, look, buddy, it ain't all projections. Projections are there for a reason, dum-dum. They're to protect you from danger. They're to help facilitate your ability to find what's good for you and avoid what's bad for you. Worked pretty damn well so far, even if you just believe in the deterministic physicalist model of human evolution. But this guy wants to play ad hominem. So I dismiss it, and then I explain to him, look, I know you wouldn't say that to my face. And then, he just might, because he might have the ability to call the police to protect his coward ass. Well, I'll tell you what then. I bet if we were in an enclosed area with all the legal waivers signed, I bet you wouldn't. Well, he might. He might be that. He might have that kind of nerve. I'm not saying I'm a bruiser. Here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that I know how to deal with that kind of nonsense. Because he's telling me to leave my ego at the door, but he wants to start off with that hum. He doesn't care about the truth, but he wants to be Mr. Guru, telling everybody how great his bliss is while the sky falls on it. Well, guess what? We don't need to hear that message. I can't believe anybody's listening to New Age idiots in this day and age. The only reason why they're still relevant is because they're talking about archons, because they're talking about covert control grids of various kinds, because they're talking about the stuff they used to tell us were just in our heads, and we needed to put on the tinfoil hats. They were just like everybody else. They're just another group of trendy morons who couldn't face some basic elements of reality and got through life successfully enough, because it turns out that in a world of lies, people who avoid the truth are somewhat propped up because they make good padding and they make good window dressing to keep everybody else in line. It's a kind of subtle, nice cop version of the good cop, bad cop control routine to keep everybody pacified on the mental and spiritual levels. Well, I confront that head on because there can't be anything but opposition between us. There's no common ground where we overlap, except in the physical world. And that's the important world where we're about which we're communicating. So the consequences, the things going on, the responses to the things in the world, the consequences of, the relevance to our lives and so forth, here and in the presumed before and hereafter, and the here before, are what they're talking about, what I'm talking about, what all people are talking about in one way or another, one way, shape, or form. So in that discussion, in their position, there's just this grand unity, and evil can be kind of blown off as being a sort of vestigial malfunction of our own inability to fully embrace the good in the world, or some nonsense like that. And they're going for that angle. You know what that is? That's rationalization, denial, identification with the aggressor. That's Stockholm Syndrome, buddy. And you might be comfortable with that as a spiritual way of life or lifestyle, but I'm going to criticize it for what it is, and I'm not going to pull any punches with you. And if all you can do is play ad hominem about it, so be it. You know, basically this can only resolve itself in one way then. It won't be logical, it won't be based on fact, and it won't be based on a persuasive argument of any kind. Because sooner or later, people like you who just have a lot more mesomorphy, a lot more technology, a lot more, a much larger armory at their disposal, more political power, whatever, who favor your position are eventually going to take that field for you. And you're going to be the hoity-toity, prissy priest in the background, blessing it with your decree of authority that says it's holy, it's good. And everybody else, those people on the other side, they just failed to leave their ego off the battlefield. They deserve everything coming to them. That's what y'all look like. You look like wussy little bystanders throwing curses at the actual combatants on the field of battle while you just skulk around with fine robes. That's what you look like and what you sound like. But that's not what I confront you with on your channels. I just state the truth for those who look like they might have an inkling of a chance to understand it. And then they just turn out to be pricks and identify with the aggressor, or they're sock puppets, who knows. That's something going on in the world that's bad enough as it is. Okay, I understand that if we just take things as they are, pretty much on face value, given the classical, given all the classical loci of authority that we can reference to steady our minds to try to understand and evaluate the phenomena we experience that in politics and economics, in society, in our personal lives, all through our worlds, the phenomena. If you just take that at the face value that the status quo wants you to take from it, which is quite plain according to the media, according to most of what's presented in culture, according to academia in most cases, even according to just most people you run into on the street in a significant number of areas of discussion. If you just took that, it would be bad enough. We'd have a whole lot to sort out. There'd be a whole lot of problems. It would be bad enough as it is. But when you look at the fundamentals of it, you have to ask yourself, okay, what's going to be my standard of knowledge? What counts as knowledge? What counts as truth? Do I even understand the concept? Does it even have value for me? What counts as substance? What counts as verified substance? What counts as right? What counts as wrong? What counts as good? What counts as evil? The list of things goes on that we need standards for in order to approach our world constructively. I'm saying if you just want to approach it constructively, you may or may not get good results or constructive results, but at least you're trying to do it in a way that, look, I'm going to try it this way. I'm going to keep track of what success rate I get, if any, and then I might tweak it or try it another way. This is progress. Even if we were doing that with just the tools we had, and even if we kept to the status quo and kept our heads down and you know, our minds kind of just wrapped around what we're told is the case in the world and how we should interpret it, we would have enough problems as it is. But you can't throw everything out completely. You have to have some basis of communication. In other words, unless I'm going to be a pure solipsist and even ignore the meaning of language except as something strictly interpreted by me, there has to be an overlap in the semantics of people communicating through a common syntax of some kind. We have to know, we have to have some way of reliably expecting others to know what the hell we're talking about. Now, how could you not have that going on some fundamental level and form a coherent society and relationship with others of any kind, personal or impersonal, if there isn't some standard set of agreements about what's right and wrong, true, false, real, fake, good, evil, agreeable, disagreeable? I mean, people will inevitably flock, birds of a feather will flock together in this regard. People will inevitably just choose to join with people more like them in these regards and spend less time with those less like them because they get more satisfaction out of life that way. If you just want to naturalize it into a question of you know, Pavlovian mechanics of behavior, they're just going to fall into there'll be just cultural drift of that sort, just like there's genetic drift. Basically, even if you want to say that there is a lot of relativity to these issues, these questions, still people select some consensus of agreement with those enough like themselves that the differences or disagreements within that scope would be tolerable. If the subject matter that's broached is very important and very critical, people have to be able to communicate about it in order to share a society and just to share a common area of any kind, in time or space, in any form. There's just no way they can do it without just smashing into each other like as if they were completely alien entities with no intelligibility to one another and actually probably very dangerous to one another because they can't even communicate. There's not even sign language or body language or the ability to identify the other side of projection, the whole point of projection, to identify danger or identify, you know, it's a friend-foe identification system, if you can wrap your head around that, new age idiots out there. But basically anybody that has common sense, that's because friends and foes actually exist in the universe, and you know, we're not just confused about that. And if you have a problem understanding that, just witness the carnage of the rest of your kind when they run into that inevitable teacher of reality, which isn't going to play passive-aggressive keyboard warrior games with you over the internet, and isn't even going to be as fair as I would be in some type of contest of some sort. It wouldn't have to be, you know, he took it as a threat because he's such a coward and a fool. He can't even understand that there are many forms of contest. It could be a public debate. It could be all kinds of things. But we would have to sign a waiver, a legal waiver, so that if, you know, he wants to go too far under the belt, he might get a visceral response. That'd keep it civil. You know, that's what keeps things civil. Because he was very uncivil, he was very rude, he was very arrogant, he was very foolish, but also he's just very wrong. And we live in a world now where these fake spiritual people come out with this passive-aggressive hypocrisy. And they just keep on, you know, sarcastically, arrogantly going on and on and on. And that could be explained as just being the nature of the beast. The human being in his confusion at this level of his evolution manifests in this way. These varieties of insulated, egotistical rationalization of paradigms which bear little resemblance to a practical relationship to reality when it comes to ethics. That just happens, okay? Well, then provide for that, and then provide for the possibility that there are not false positives, but actual tracking of what's right and wrong, good and evil, and true and false in reality. Make room for that too. You can't just keep on dismissing everything as fake or relative. There has to be some reference point that makes that intelligible. It's got to be significant enough and objective enough to overshadow the argument that just everybody's bullshit is as good as anyone else's and everybody's just looking through things from their own subjective, totally relative perspective. It doesn't work that way. You can't use that argument dropping the context that makes it intelligible, which is that there is a frame of reference that makes sense. You're even using that, if you do that, by claiming that you have the frame of reference that makes sense. Well, it makes sense if you just want to nullify arguments at will and rationalize your own delusions. Yeah, that's great. I'm not buying into that shit, nor is anyone else who's honest. I can get into ad hominem too. You want to get into ad hominem? You want to have word wars and mockery and insult and nothing else? We can do that, and we can get into all kinds of conflict. But just proves that you're idiots. New Age fools out there doing that. Zen Gardner or Alex, whatever the hell your goddamn name is. I'm straightforward and honest. I identify myself by my name. I show my face. I don't use filters. I state everything exactly as I think it and feel it. I could use filters. I could polish it and make it all safe, and I could be a little wormy, little slimy, overly polite coward like certain people, and then just be a hypocrite because underneath I'm simmering and I don't want to say it that way at all. I don't want to express just that or even that. I'm not doing that. And there's no time for that. That time for that's long past. Because I have no interest in doing this. I have no interest in uncovering corruption. I don't want there to be corruption. I want that shiny, happy city on the hill. But it ain't. And when that reality hits home, there's no more games to play for people that can see what's at the end of that road. Okay? And I can see that the road is short. So I feel sometimes, honestly, I just feel a struggle. Do I want to reveal anything do I know? Do I want to discuss anything I know? Do I want to teach or tell anything do I know that I know? Or do I just want to stay a recluse with my books, with my hobbies, with my interests? Find work where I can just be alone on a graveyard shift and not have to serve asshole customers. And I'll get to explaining those people too. There's an explanation for everything. And then there's a better explanation. And then there's a best explanation given all the evidence. And the ones that are being provided for people's behavior in the world today is just not adequate. And that's the struggle, because in trying to understand that, I had to get through so many barriers that just go way past the conventional interpretations of human psychology and sociology. And it's just, cognitive dissonance just doesn't account for it. We're not built to fuck up that badly if nature had an efficient and true hand in the matter. We wouldn't have gotten to this level where we could contemplate and realize an ideal and then just self-sabotage it so consistently. It just doesn't work that way. Nature doesn't take stupid risks like that. Plus, there's just too much potential. If some can realize the city on the hill, why not all? Why is there such resistance to it? And why is there so much perfidy and policies toward dystopia running rife through society that people just act like aren't there? Some examples of this. This is what draws me into it. I'm watching Alex Jones, okay? His news is really good. He brings up a lot of important things that I used to have to dig through newspapers, and I used to have to dig through the internet, and I used to have to dig through other media to get to. I even got to dig through Ren's news, Ren's on Ren's.com. He's just so much fluff in there that's just, but it's still good. Although there's a lot of junk in there like Zen Gardner's crap. But look, if it's coming down to the question of what's best, what's the best thing to do, we have to have some kind of standard for judging that. And if all Zen Gardner wants to do is whine about people's tone, he wants to be the tone police, we ain't got time for that anymore. I'm not playing games with you, buddy. I'm not going to make comments on your stupid little ridiculous platform of delusion. Fine. You know, you can block me or censor me off that, whatever you want. But if I ever do show up in a platform with you, no kids gloves, buddy. Bare knuckles. Because you've gone over the line with your hypocrisy. It's your hypocrisy. There isn't one tiny part of my ego that's bothered by you, Zen. Not one tiny part. You disgust me for your presumptuousness, your arrogance, your projection, your hypocrisy. Your cowardice. You're a spiritual coward, Zen. You don't face truth. You don't face reality. It's all about your ego. You are pathetic. You are a red herring. You are a gigantic red herring. And you're not even that gigantic of one. You're just like you're an echo of one that I've seen somewhere before. Maybe an extra dimensional entity that was channeled through a book by Sayana Roman. You're a pale reflection of a spiritual entity. But there you are, soaking up a lot of attention. Every once in a while, I can't help myself. I go by and see you gallivanting like a fool, thinking you got it figured out, and I throw in something you can't handle, and then you break out immediately into ad hominem. I've got the record of it. It's pathetic, your response. So I take off the gloves and sink to your level a little bit. No problem. It's just like as if you swung at me in public. Why not? Well, then why the hell not? I may as well just pummel you into the ground then. People like you you're putting souls and lives at risk. There are critical things going on in the world that need to be faced for what they are. And your snake oil, your new age snake oil of just look at it through rose-colored glasses and then it will all be fine, ain't working with people. And it ain't sure the hell ain't working with me. That stopped working with me long before I ran across your scurvy ass. You know, I have dealt with entities. I don't know about you. I don't know what kind of world you live in, Zen, and I really don't care, just like you said about me, but I've dealt with entities that do exist and that are not human. I'll just say it. It doesn't matter to me. A lot of people claim to believe in a higher power that blessed them and made them this and that, or an evil power that cursed them and made their lives miserable, whatever. But I'm just telling you, in the world, there are beings which exist that do bear influence on the human mind. How far that goes and what form it takes past the visible domain, we can leave that as open as we want. The bottom line is their influence is either good or bad. Positive or negative, good or evil. Right or wrong, ethical or unethical. No double standards. In other words, if there's ever something incorrect in a position, show why. Show the flaw, show the contradiction, show the inaccuracy. Don't attack someone's tone and get into this ad hominem crap like you're some kind of spiritual tough guy and you're going to set someone right because they don't know how to get their wings. Piss on that shit, buddy. You and your little sock puppet, they may as well be sock puppets. They humor you. And the same for all the rest of you wannabes. Just because you submitted to some kind of brainwashing, including just fooling yourselves sometimes into not facing things or seeing things as they are, just because you put yourself through that, that doesn't mean everybody else has got to kiss your ass. There are things going on in this world that matter enough that basically that has to be cut through. On some fundamental level, I don't know what level, energetically, people have got to cut through that delusion. In some people's cases, I think it needs to be a slap in the face, straight up. But in some cases, you know, it's got to be some critical mass, some point reached where just nobody's buying it anymore. Nobody's listening. Nobody's watching. They're going to keep the algorithms going that make you think everybody's really into your crap. They keep the internet topologies going that recycle with what I call the good trolls, the positive trolls, the little sycophants, the paid sycophants, because they must be getting paid by some. It must be the counter fiat money that's being pumped into them through social programs and various propped up embezzlement schemes. Because that's the only reason why I can understand why people could keep on, because their stomachs are full. That's it. Once that's gone, all the delusions about all this stuff drops. You watch all these paradigms just fly out the window. What happens when your cozy little place in the woods or wherever you're going to run to hide when the cities collapse? What happens when that's taken away because you find that wild animals are suddenly being relocated, dislocated by natural and unnatural phenomena, or covert black ops military groups take special interest in people like you all of a sudden? Oh, you think they're just going to go up in smoke with the rest of us? No, they're in the deep underground military bases, baby. That shit's funded. That's publicly known, like it or not. There are people that have it in for you, and they don't care if you've been a useful idiot this whole time, spewing propaganda that are probably being amplified in internet topological echo chambers, just as assuredly as there are likely to be channels, perhaps mine, that are filtered through topologies which censor them from reaching the people that really might need to hear what I have to say, to try to convince me perhaps that I have nothing to say, and perhaps they have trolls specially allocated for that purpose. It's a soft kill. It's cultural reengineering through covert methodology. It's fucking psychological warfare 101. I mean, did you happen to ever read manuals on psychological warfare? Or intelligence analysis? Or the intelligence analysis cycle? Or special forces operations? Full spectrum dominance. Read the white paper on it, and if you can't deal with it, well, you can't deal with it, but that's the world you're in. And it's not going to change because you're not comfortable with my tone. And it's a pretty serious world. Generally, when I first started, I had the sweetest approach, the most conciliatory, the most open-minded. And all I run into is bullshit. You're just going to have to accept the deterministic consequences of that, or you're going to have to come yourself in person and try to put me in my place. You don't want to do that. Like I said, there are ways to arrange for things for people that want to act like that. So just shut that noise up right now. I'm talking about facts, I'm talking about logic, and I'm talking about truth, and I'm talking about it my way, and if you don't like it, that's tough. You don't like it on your channel, just blacklist me. Just tell me, look, I'm blacklisting you, and I don't care. Just be public about it and be open about it like I am. Don't be some sneaky coward and let my comments ride and block it from everybody else on your channel so that there's no communication, and then just let me see it for my own. I'm not into that for my own amusement or for my own edification. I'm doing that for others. It's a service to others, believe it or not. And if there's something so wrong with it, you should let it stand so that it can show up for what it is. Why are you hiding it? The truth is, the only reason why things are hidden in this world is because they're shameful and they're wrong. And I'm not hiding anything I've got to say or what I think or what I'm doing. If anyone is hiding something someone else is doing, it's because it's challenging and exposing something they don't want to face or they don't want other people to see. Because they're up to something no good. Including just sitting in their little comfort zone while Rome burns. Well, look, I honestly don't think that the world has a chance. It's allowed corruption to go on too long, too deeply, and too far. It's going to devour itself and destroy itself. That's not what I ever wished for it. I used to be on that little new age little delusion where, oh yeah, it depends on what possible world you choose to be in, because no one's injustice can prevail over anyone else. Each person chooses their own path, la-di-da-di-da. Well, yeah, okay, then what? You really think that the people who were religiously persecuted in China because they happened to be Falun Gong wanted their organs harvested so that they could learn a spiritual lesson from that? You really think that? They're learning a spiritual lesson, all right. Why don't you go to the people who actually suffer, you New Age idiots? Why don't you go to the people who actually suffer? I had one of them tell me about things that I was telling them were going on in the world. He says, well, I didn't see it. I didn't myself see that happen. For all I know, that's just a projection just to try to trick me out of my own bliss. And then when I tried to confront him with the fact that some of that stuff happened to me and people I know and I saw it firsthand, he flipped out. He couldn't handle it. And it was all in an even tone, but all of a sudden, I'm too loud. You know what? Reality's too loud for some people. Truth is too loud. Doing what's right's too loud because they're cowards. And all you want to do is discuss somebody's outer trimmings. As if they themselves didn't care about the substance of which they speak. As if they themselves weren't putting themselves at risk and being on the line. You despicable coward, Zen! But you know what? This isn't about him. It's about that kind of person. It's about that character trait. And that just riles me up. I can't just pass by that and say nothing. I can't just pass by a child being slapped around brutally and do nothing. I've got to get in between there, and I gotta break some limbs. And one of mine might get broken in the process, but I'm going to be proud of that because I'll know in my heart I did something that was right, though it was a danger to me, and I could have gotten away in a shitty, cowardly culture as it is in the world today. I could have got away with just going the other way like they do in Europe all the time when women are getting raped. And I'm not even a social justice warrior or a feminist or a women's rights activist or anything. And hell yeah, I know how manipulative as a group they are. But so are we. If you want to identify with just one aspect of yourself, you're denuding yourself of every possible counterbalance that could make you shine in a better light. I'm not going to reduce myself to, I am a man, I am a male, I am an American, I am a this, I am a that. No. I am a spiritual sovereign being with a fully divinely invested conscience that knows right from wrong, true from false, real from fake, except to the degree that the limits of the physical body, as sadistically created by some fiendish mind, which I despise and would never worship. I wouldn't even give it the time of day, let alone worship it if it came to my face in a discernible form. It comes in a multiplicity of forms. It's a coward. It's fundamentally an evil creature with a black heart pumping ichor somewhere deep in the bowels of what passes for a world. And then all the people that subscribe to its mentality are basically remotely controlled by the memes or the processes that they are inspired to believe in from the noosphere or the ether or wherever else you think ideas come from. Platonic alternate universes, I don't care. Whatever the proximal cause of it is, the result is just as horrific when it's wrong, isn't it? You pick up the wrong hitchhiker, too bad for you. You might be as new agey as you want, but I can tell you, you're getting yourself in a lot of trouble with your presumptuousness, because if you keep, you're attracting stuff to yourself by your denial, by your denying its existence. You're being tracked and hunted by forces you don't understand. And you want to be in denial about it, fine. I'm the antidote to that denial. I'm not going to be a Judas goat. And you might just be thoroughly traumatized spiritual weaklings. Well, then in that case, you're an unwitting, very useful, idiotic Judas goat. And I'm not going to abide by that. I'm not going to condone that. I'm not going to support that. I'm going to rail against it from time to time. But in some cases, all I have to do is say an inconvenient truth. And that stirs up the hornet's nest in their little egos. And then they spout all the stuff that their guru pounded into their heads until they submitted. You're projecting. You leave your ego at the door, da-da-da. And they say, yes, guru, and they obeyed. Without even asking themselves, wait a minute. I came here with the best of intentions and the best of faith. And this guy just bushwhacked me over some bullshit that I wouldn't take from a guy in the street. Even if he was sitting in a wheelchair, was demonstrably disabled and mentally retarded. But I'm going to take it from this asshole who acts like he's God's avatar on earth? Okay, now I'm going to get past all that, because that was just the prelude. Here's the big deal. The surface appearances that I alluded to earlier, the classical loci of which are found in all your available books if you ever bother to go to the library and open one, people who've been there and done that, people who've experienced it, people who've been to the wars and seen the suffering, people that have done the contemplation, the work out in the wilds and done the meditation and did the 40 days and all the other stuff. The people that actually came to grips with the world in which they live and got and did it with the best of intentions, put the flower in the muzzle of the gun and almost got shot in the face. That kind of stuff, okay, is available for your research, and you can peruse it anytime you like. But let me just cut through that, because there's going to be stuff left out of that, especially in possible worlds where it just happens to be the case that really bad things are going on that are being hidden from everybody. Can you imagine that? Here, I'm going to start with the really bad things that are going on that aren't hidden from anybody. How about everything that's in your water that you know shouldn't be in your water? I'm going to keep it general because I'm not talking to the idiots anymore. At all. I've left them out. I've basically just filtered them out by cursing them for what they are and describing them to everybody else and themselves in, I think, rather sufficient terms. To all the half-thinking and fully thinking people who want to think more and want to get to the bottom of things, look at what you damn well know is wrong in the world, and then look at people's responses to it. as Alex Jones and others say, it's like they're in a trance. David Icke keeps talking about they're in a trance. All these guys are doing is describing stuff everybody can see for themselves, find out for themselves, and won't, or if it's presented to them, they just go into denial, and they're beating and pounding. They used to be so blissful in their, well, maybe not Alex Jones, but he was always hysterical. But David Icke used to be so much more, I don't want to, he sounded a lot more like Zen Gardner, honestly, that sort of, and then it all comes down to love in the end, and just love one another. Well, you know what, that ain't cutting to the chase. I mean, it's good to be capable of that. But you got to understand there are people in the world that don't play that game. David, they don't. And when you understand them for what they are, you can't keep using that tack. Now, you can go out like Gandhi if you want, but that's your choice, and that's not spiritually superior to everyone else's. Alex Jones, he wants to go out like, King Clovis, with a battle axe, even if it's going to be, in a metaphorical sense. But I think everybody, when it comes down to physical self-defense, ought to at least not disdain the person that's willing to get visceral and preserve their body as long as possible, especially if it's for a good reason, like David Icke's reasons, and Alex Jones's reasons, and supposedly Zen Gardner's reasons, and others' reasons. These spiritual, even some of these spiritual saints that are bristling with ego defense mechanisms that they readily project on anybody that doesn't subscribe to their bullshit moral relativism, that doesn't want to subscribe to la-la land Pollyannic theories of The Secret or the laws of attraction and all that other bullshit. That's toxic shit. That's also in everybody's faces. Why can't they see that that's snake oil? Why can't they see that the media is not, that the media should not be known for being full of liars? Why can't they see that the CIA has broken its own charter by conducting operations in the country? Why can't they see that whenever George Bush Jr. says you're either with us or you're with the terrorists, that's an inclusive or statement, which means you could be with them and with the terrorists, and they could even be the same entity. According to all logics, all basic logic, that wouldn't even be a contradiction. I mean, he's standing there saying you're either with us or you're with the terrorists. That's like saying, he may as well be saying you're either with us and the terrorists, or the sky is purple, or the sky is blue. I mean, it doesn't matter if that happens to be the case. And then if you put it on the other side of the oar, you're either with us or with the terrorists. Well, tell me where the line is drawn. When you're hiding information, whenever you're suppressing evidence, when you're pre-programming the propaganda machine to come out with an interpretation of an event, whenever you're setting up drills to occur when these events happen to occur in reality, when all the world wants to see something that you're hiding, you tell me where to draw the line. When you boldly say you're either with us or you're with the terrorists. When you're basically bullying people to decide you're the good guy no matter what, or they're the bad guy. That's bullshit. That's not the job of the office of president. And it's not the job of the office of government to do that, although it's readily abused for that purpose. That's been known for hundreds of years. The classics tell us that. Well, how come people are in a daze about it and do nothing, though in history they've never had more political power to do something about it? Why do they go on the take so easily? Why do they accept bribes to conduct covert counterintelligence operations against other people in their own supposed society? Because I'll tell you the answer to all these questions. There is not one society, and there never has been. Look through history. There have always been castes, classes of society distinguished by their privilege and sometimes even by their legal status, not even just by their characteristics. Now, just because it's been modernized, polished, made to look nice, and very technologically advanced, and even has a great ideological and ideologically great and rhetorically beautiful founding document of contractual agreement upon which that society and its government should be founded. Well, even if that's the case, none of that rules out class. There are still class. You can see it. Now, have things really gotten better? There was a time when they seemed to, but then that suddenly disappeared right after Project Paperclip. I don't know about you, but I think that might have had something to do with it. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they just have, maybe something about that and what caused it have something in common, so that would have happened anyway. But they sure did get a boost from Project Paperclip, I can tell you that. And the CIA just took, intelligence agencies just took off. They ran with it. They ran with every invention they could get, and they'd been already doing this in some form since electrodynamics, electromagnetics, and the relationship to the nervous system were first discovered in the early 1800s. They jumped right on that as fast as King Henry is going to jump on the latest technology for making torture more painful. Just that quick. You think they wouldn't? Oh, you're silly. You're silly. You live in a fantasy land. You're in a gilded cage of thick glass walls, and it's a one-way transparent, and on the inside it's painted to look like it's paradise. That's what you are if you believe that. Okay, now let's look at the inventions that have existed. There are plenty of inventions which exist now that we know about that are preeminently useful and can be easily dual purpose for the sake of covert social engineering and control. It's easily done. Easily done. I'm not even going to argue it. The point, though, is that when looking at the visible problems in the world, which clearly demand, the problems with the kind of rhetoric coming out of politicians' mouths, compare that with the kind that was coming out of, say, an Eisenhower or a Kennedy. Yeah, I'm not saying they were completely on the up and up, but compare Bush with Kennedy or Eisenhower, please. Compare, hell, even compare them with Nixon. Compare the kind of political hacks we have today with those of before. Compare the kind of things that are being casually put into the food, air, and water now compared to what was casually being put in the food, air, and water before. Compare the fact that people have instant communication available to them and can find this stuff out instantly if they want, and they don't bother to. Look, there is such a thing as manufactured consent. To some degree, the New Age buffoons and some of the religious thinkers with whom I might not agree with on a whole lot, I agree with them on this. There is such a thing as manufactured consent. Silence is consent if you're given evidence about which to become vocal. The way you behave is consent if it doesn't demonstrate an aversion to what's happening to you. There are a lot of things, because for all a reptile knows, if you don't move while it's slowly devouring you, then you must be food. You're not even putting up a fight. That's the law of nature right there if you want to break it down. We don't even have to go up to theology. But think about it. If you're morally dead, you don't have a soul or a conscience, and you just go right into this system of control, you don't even think about where fiat money comes from, you don't even think about fractional reserve banking and the nature of pyramid schemes and fraud on that level, even though there's people railing about it in the government, Ron Paul being just one among many. If you don't wonder what really happened whenever you really shouldn't be believing your eyes, or at least what the media immediately tells you you're seeing whenever a major traumatic event occurs that totally destabilizes everyone's consciousness from then on, and is used then as a justification for many groundbreaking changes in our own society as well as in the lives of people all over the world. If you're not looking at that askance just a little bit, then maybe there's nothing in there to save. If you are, then you better keep doing that, and you better keep doing it until you get to the bottom of it, because to not do that is a form of death. You're giving up on the faculty of rational assessment and sensible ethical evaluation of things, just on the abstract, let alone any chance for an actual moral feeling to become sentient inside you. So I would warn against that very strongly. I would say you should keep on chipping away at it. And if you have a less time or ability to do it for whatever circumstances, then at least don't mock the people who are sacrificing their time and energy and taking risks with their lives to expose this information and look into it even. Have some sense and some decency. And if in any way you feel that you are emotionally or monetarily or physically or in any other way rewarded for doing so, curse you. Straight to hell. Because you've taken a bribe from the devil. You're scum. And if there wasn't a devil, you just invented him. He's whatever the asshole is that's pulling your strings. It might be some corpulent, pot-bellied pedophile somewhere in the bowels of the Federal Reserve Bank, or it might be just any number of villains. but you basically are just like, you're the ghoul that serves their grave. And they're the vampire that sucks your blood and the blood of the innocent. You leave people, you better just stand aside in awe at the people that are uncovering this information and revealing it to you. Because guess what? It's almost over. You think a system of fraud like this so monumental? Keep going. They're talking about it in the mainstream news. You have less than a year to get your head straight. And if you have a soul, you better get it ready. And you know what else? If it don't happen, it's not meant to happen naturally. They prop up these systems of false currency economies. It is falsified currency so that they can set the manner in which they rationalize the sudden unavailability of things which could keep being produced. There's nothing stopping them. There has to be an electrical outage to stop the economy. I don't give a damn what's written on a ledger. Farmers grow food. Delivery drivers drive delivery trucks. Grocery stores have stockers, and everybody eats. There's no goddamn way the assholes with the golden parachutes get to go have their little private reserves and go on for 100 years if they want, 3 generations, while the rest of us die, just because a little piece of paper said so. It's just because the stupidity of the public let them get away with it. That's the only reason. Now, I'm trying to point out to you the reason that that happened. Because it wasn't just the brilliant propaganda machine basically designed and invented by the likes of Edward Bernays and psychoanalysts cooperating with him. Probably Freud was working with him as a mentor on that. It's not just these Pavlovian types of behaviorist, Skinnerian, mind butcher type of psychologists who just look for ways to manipulate. These people want to reinforce the methodologies of liars because they get funding from that. You see how it works? Here's how it works. If there's an honest economy, one way, this is one dimension of how it works. I'm going to tell you one way it works, and that's for starters. I'm going to make it simple. Counterfeit money. If anybody in a system of trade can just take what others have, that would be robbery, burglary, theft. But if I offer you something in trade for it, presumably of the same value, that's up to you to decide, but it could be an equitable exchange, and if you choose to accept it, no harm done. I could sell you a lemon, but that would be fraud, and if you found out, we'd have to address that before a magistrate or just have a duel or whatever. But let's say that there is a currency that can be easily falsified in some way. Let's say that they can dig up a whole lot of gold, let's use gold, and then just lie about how much they have so that the market has an artificial amount of scarcity. The value goes up. Next thing you know, though, anytime they need to shift things in the economy their way, these secret gold hoarders, who didn't report their find, by the way, and that, I believe, is illegal, you can't rip everybody else in society off. You don't really have the right to do that. But let's just say you have the right to keep that to yourself and not tell everybody that you have a big chunk of gold. What you cannot then do is take that and use it as an instrument to bludgeon entire sectors of a society with so that they do what you say, basically. I don't care how many think tanks tell you what the best approach would be to change society, and then you use that as leverage. You can't do that with an inflated currency that comes in the form of paper money either. I don't care what it's attached to or tied to, including fossil fuels, which are related to an engine which is so outdated. It's like it's the equivalent of, compared to what is available and has been available for a long time and has been incrementally discovered, invented, and then shelved by companies that buy out and threaten the people who come up with these things, including governments. What that is like compared to what's actually available and kept artificially scarce, like the gold, to use the example again. It's like being the Flintstone family, picking up your damn rock car and running around with it. It's that stupid compared to what's available. Just, it is. Now, given that that's the case, Can you imagine a parallel world to the one you believe is the one we're in, where people who could get away with doing that consistently could use that against you, say in the form of covert weaponry, energy, energy forms that can be projected or directed so as to irritate your sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, different aspects of your limbic system, all of which respond to certain frequencies of electromagnetic stimulation, by the way. Acoustic weapons, subliminal acoustic weapons, sub-audible, and trans-audible, beyond the level of your higher range of hearing. Yeah, they can do that. They do that. They do have those things. It doesn't matter if you believe it. Look, I'm telling you, you can look, just hypothesize they exist, and then see how, if those existed, that would be pretty goddamn handy for manipulating people, wouldn't it? You could drive people crazy, you could fuck people's lives, you could ruin their health, and then you could make it look like it was just, they just, it's just their genetics, and they couldn't handle the stress. And who could blame them, considering all the other factors, and that included. And then, if you look at the history of psychiatry, psychology, they've been colluding with the state for a long time to identify people who are politically incorrect, and then accuse them of this or that disease, and then butcher their brains, or just lock them away, or just mistreat them like animals, or pump drugs into them. Once they get a kind of status quo going where people accept things like that, you're just one step away from spraying it on everybody for their own good. Well, if you already accept it in your water, you let them put fucking rat poison in your water. Why shouldn't they spray you with barium salts? Telling you, it's right in front of your face. Everything they do to you, society, and to whatever extent they get away with it with me, is done on the basis that you tolerate it. First of all, so that's why they did it in increments. That's why they do it covertly. It's not because, it might not even be because of a metaphysical law that requires them to confess what they do in advance, or foreshadow it, or anything like that to warn you. It might be that just kind of desensitizes you to it, because they act like it's a joke, and then they actually hit you. Haha, oh, I got you. Bam! Then they got you. So if that's what's going on, which makes sense because people actually do that, why couldn't it be happening on a mass level? There is such a thing as organized crime. Why couldn't it be at a very large level? Criminals only want to fit inside your little narrow view of the world? Well, guess what? That's not how they look at things. In some people's narrow view of the world, passing a gun law disarms criminals. Well, guess what? It sure the hell doesn't. In fact, anybody picking up a gun instantly becomes one by definition. But there are people who'll do it for a lot more reasons than just the right to have one. And they've been doing it all along, and they're never going to stop. You made it illegal, so what? They were about to do something else illegal anyway. This makes it easier, and they're more likely to get away with it. How many ways does it have to be pointed out that people aren't using common sense before people start to wonder, is there maybe something going on systematically that fucks with people's common sense? Maybe, you think, possibly, just maybe. I want to say that the propaganda is powerful enough. The theory suggests that it is. Human behavior and its propensity for rationality, and the abuse it suffered for thousands of years under the hands of tyrants, which was carried generation to generation, nation to nation, even when they moved to new worlds like this one. They even carried it with them in the form of slaughtering everybody here so they could create their ideal society. Look, everybody's been doing it throughout history, so that's already there. Now, technologically augmenting it is just going to make it, what? The same thing, worse. Because you just made evil more efficient. You've just made tyranny more efficient. That's what we've lived under throughout history, in case you haven't noticed. Even the Greeks did. These so-called inventors of democracy. Well, where do you think we live now? Just because technology gets propped up in the public sphere, it's mostly baubles compared to what should have been in existence. We should probably have warp drive by now. I mean, shit. Who knows? Probably the parallel society has had it and has always had it, and perhaps everybody in the rubric of history is just part of a human zoo for their amusement, and always has been for about 100 million years. How do you like that scenario? Oh, and what if Jesus only loves people that realize that and fight against it because because only those people have a spiritual essence capable of recognizing a real world from a false one in the first place? He's not going to I mean, there's obviously an evil force here if you're bound in a world like that. There might be some limits to the power of spiritual beings because, first of all, there might be an actual kind of need for consent. Well, how can they get informed consent from you if you don't even have the capacity to realize what the hell's going on? It's not even in you. Well, then they're simply not able to lift you out of this. You belong in here. I'm just using that as an extreme case in point. It's a metaphysical schema, if you will, a thought experiment, if you will, to help people, just for the deluded people who think that they can just make anything out of what I say and what fits in their delusional little world is adequate to what I've actually said. Intelligent people know what I'm saying. Given that thought experiment and many others like it, which could reframe your perception of what counts as normal and adequate to your full potential and perhaps the attention of higher powers, which may or may not have any interest in you for any good reason and may have maleficent reasons to be interested in you because you might be entertainment. It doesn't have to be Rod Serling to bring it to your attention. You could think it a little bit. After all, what do you think weaponized culture is? It's an attempt to program you, especially with weaponized media, especially with weaponized food, air, and water, especially with weaponized infrastructure, smart dust, total surveillance. There is chipping that goes on in the vaccines and in whatever they're spraying. These are hypotheses. I don't have direct evidence of it myself, but I know that there are inventions that exist that are adequate to these purposes, and I know the maleficent intentions of those who've been doing what we already admit they've been doing, so why act like it's a big leap in faith here? It's not. It's actually a reasonable induction. And I question the rationality of someone who doesn't make it or respond to it kindly when they hear it because it reveals that there's something wrong with their head. So what stops them from going that far and going further into such realms as psychotronics control grids modulated by the same technology which allows instant communication, but which simultaneously can be weaponized to either coerce certain states of mind, which they already admit they can do with certain types of light bulbs and their flicker rates or on screens. Who's to say that all this, once it's reached a certain synergetic level, would be consciously undetectable, but would have all the impact of being hit with a psychological sledgehammer as far as your ability to maintain your own freely chosen course of mind and conduct? What's the excuse for that? Everybody's so scared of terrorists, and they're so scared of us because we might think they're terrorists because they're not with us on something like tranny bathrooms, that we should probably, for their own good, because they're clearly not able to, they're incapacitated and can't make these kind of decisions on their own, or they probably would have stopped us a long time ago, right? Why don't we just, control their pathetic little minds and brains with these microwave towers, which are dual purpose suitable for that, or just fry them? Well, it's for their own good, because riots can happen, when economies collapse, like buildings. So what I'm saying is, why would I bring that up? Because I see Alex Jones, David Icke, and others, and many people, and I've seen myself do it for decades, frankly, in different ways, struggle with the density, the opacity, the thick-headedness of people in various ways. I'm like, how does that happen? Is it just that that's how the inertia is? Are they really that immobile in their cognition? Is there really that much cognitive dissonance? Is the lability of their thinking process really that fucking fossilized? And are they really that oblivious to the facts of their senses, their own internal reports of their experiences, coincidences which should not be that damn frequent, in other words, forced serendipities, because that's what they can coordinate with instant communication and willing little street actors? I mean, just think about it. They're not getting paid to sit on their asses on welfare. They're getting paid to do whatever they're told, because you got that level, and then you got the stuff that they're willing to do by implied consent, and then you've got street drugs and psychotronics working together to get that stuff moving. You got organized crime to set up scenarios and frame people and then coerce them into a situation that, even if the lights were on and the media were reporting, might be passed off as something other than what it is. You really think they don't, or can't, or don't want to, or aren't set in motion to do that? You're not paying attention to the evidence. That's further evidence of the psychotronics control grid. I'm telling you about something that helps explain the fucking world you live in right now better than it's explained without it. And it's not complicated. The entrainment of a nervous system with electromagnetic induction is science. Now, if you pervade an environment with different modulators, they take the stress off one vector of energy application. They prevent cell death, and they prevent adaptation beyond the controlled parameters that they decide upon. They can sculpt people's lives this way. They want to play God with you, idiots. They're already doing it. They're already doing it, even if it was just with the counterfeit money they print at the Federal fucking Reserve. You let them get away with counterfeiting. You're letting economists get away with these sham, well-paid jobs so they can dress in fine clothes and have suburban houses and eat at the places you can't, while you're getting ripped off by what their arcane mumbo-jumbo defines as valid economics. It's a goddamn blatant pyramid scheme. Would you let somebody come to your house and buy your stuff from you with pieces of paper that had numbers written on them? But you'll let them do it if they make it look just like the real thing. No, that's still a federal crime, sorry. The Treasury Department should be arresting those criminals and locking them away, and I'm not seeing it happen. That tells me something. That's collusion. People who lie to the public, especially if they're in public office, are allowed to do so. That's collusion with corruption. Citizens who look the other way when the rights of other citizens are being abused, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, etc., 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 right to defend oneself, right to bear arms, are colluding with enemies of the state by definition, which is founded on the Constitution, the defense of which is sworn by all of its officers of the law in government and in the military to defend from all enemies, foreign and domestic. I'm not seeing a whole hell of a lot of that when I'm seeing this much corruption in the government, when I'm seeing DARPA being used as a little pet mad scientist invention and proving grounds for means of manipulating society covertly. What do you think a panopticon is? It was written about by Jeremy Bentham in the late 1800s. It's about a theoretical optimization of a prison environment so that people were always visible to someone that they weren't sure was watching them or not. 1984 was written on the same vein, and it's actually the fact of the world you live in right now. They don't need you to know about it yet. They like to smooth it in. They like to ease it in. It's all about getting you to accept the rape slowly, so that some part of your poor brain with all those weird defense mechanisms defines it as not rape. It's about letting them eat you slowly so that you don't feel like you're submitting to a certain death. So don't go around hopping around showing me how fancy and how awesome you are, or how great your lifestyles are, or how sage your humility and your wisdom is, or all these other things, when you can't face the reality of the world you live in. I don't want to know about that shit. I know that there is some natural talent in every person. There is some spark of God in everything. I know that. That doesn't change a thing. It makes it worse to be conducting yourselves in these foolish and evil ways. That's why I've told the entire world this, and that's why covert internet topologies involving whitelisting have been employed against me, because they don't want people to get the message. They want me to believe people are that stupid and that arrogant that they can't get it. And they won't get it just because of my tone. I'm not buying that shit. Look, there's reasons for my tone. You don't like it? Fuck off. I'm being honest. I'm being sincere, and I'm being forthright. That should count for something too, assholes. And yeah, I'm insulting those people that would throw out the baby with the bathwater 99 times out of 100. They use that excuse because most of them are just pay trolls, they're shills, they're psychological warfare casualties. Useful idiots. That's what most of them are. They don't deserve anything but reviling from me. They're the main reason things have gotten to the way they are. Because they're props, they're filler, they're a meat wall, a meat shield, behind which occult activities occur which degrade the very presumption of their humanity, even while they're elevated to far more than they can presume to be worth. I don't consider any of this rocket science yet. So why the hell would anybody accuse me of being arrogant and wanting to sound intellectual and highfalutin? This is the most rudimentary way I can get it across. I don't have to show you my work, my notes, my studies, my mind. I'm not interested in showing you me. I'm showing you you. Your world. The reason why when it's destroyed by a celestial event or an earthquake or a planned engineered economic collapse or whatever other reason that it goes off into that dark night, that you should start counting your life as worthless now. Don't wait until then to be shocked and surprised. You don't deserve an anesthetic euthanasia. I hope it's long and slow. I hope that the honest and decent people are whisked away. Or the reverse, that all this damn scum and rot is whisked away. Where's the silver bullet of colloidal silver of the cosmic degree when you need it? I want it poured all over. Everywhere. In everything. When it comes, you will know. When it comes. Just like everybody on their deathbed. Evil or good, when they're on their deathbed in their old age. Oh boy. You better bet they're facing some tough realities. That's the end of their world. The world just ended for them. If it happens quickly, that's for them the same thing as if the whole damn thing ended. What am I telling you about when I talk about the end of the world other than the end of your last chance to do something worthy of being called human? So for those who are willing to face the reality of these admittedly somewhat hypothetical explanations, but very, very concretely relevant and in no way tenuous, possibly explanatory phenomena causes reasons for understanding the irrationality and the absurdity of it, which is built upon itself seemingly as an exponential degree. The fulcrums of technology have always made things more efficient, whether for good or evil. It's just consistent with the logic of all that we know. So why would you put it past them to have such an infrastructure set up? I mean, it took that. Okay, I'll tell you. Why am I so cynical? Why am I so hateful? Why am I so unloving in my tone or whatever? It took that. It took knowledge that people were that low, that spiritually bereft of conscience and soul, that, whether witting or unwitting, a part of something so nefarious. Once it was demonstrated in every domain of evidence by valid reasoning, deductive, inductive, abductive, and metaphysical, that these things were going on, and once it was just crystal clear, that had nothing to do with what I wanted to believe, so it wasn't a projection, I wasn't afraid of it, I already faced the reality of life and death, okay? I know who I am. I know how I came to my decisions. I have control of my actions. I am saying not everybody agrees with me. Fuck them. They're assholes. I can prove that they're the ones who are deficient mentally. I have the evidence, so I have the transcripts of our interaction, so I can prove it. All I know is that, look, if it comes down to what really matters, don't pretend something really matters that doesn't. What really matters is the essence of your soul, what it feels like to be alive, and whether or not that's still alive in you, or can be, or should be. Because that's who the saviors are looking for. And if you can't find that in yourself, then you can't save yourself either. Even if you're the only one who could. Even if no one could save you. How could you even imagine that unless that made some sense? Aren't things worth saving? Isn't there, even if a lemon is rot. I love lemons, you know, they're really great for your voice. I'm gonna have to eat one later, and they're great with vitamins and phytonutrients and other things, right? Even if two parts of it are thoroughly rotten, if the skin that separates the segments is sufficiently thick in that particular case, and if the rot was somehow contained and didn't spread, the rest of it's edible. That's the part we'll save. We're not going to save this part. Now think about that in the short term. In the short term, you might get some advantages working with criminals, organized criminals, powerful organized criminals, but you're just a criminal and a coward. Wouldn't want to be you, wouldn't want to be like you. I'll tell you that right now. You can feel good about if you want what you've done or who you are. Fine, I don't care. You can put it in my face, as you usually do, as if I'm supposed to be impressed. It means nothing to me. I've proven that. The proof is in the pudding. You see these people killing themselves. You see these people trying to escape what they've gotten themselves into. You see them crying about it, whining about it. You see them regretting it. None of them are happy. Even the ones with the ultimate power, they're just grim ghouls as far as I can see. You can pretend all you want. I'm not going to join you. It's not worth it to me. I'm speaking for myself. I'm not trying to persuade anyone. It's not worth it to me. I would never join that shit. That's beneath me. That's beneath my dignity. That's beneath my honor. That's beneath my honor in every way. In the nature of who I am, and also in the official capacities as a citizen, as an infantryman, as a philosopher, as an actual warrior, someone that knows what that means, as someone who's made it his duty to understand the world he lives in and to do what's right in it. That's absolutely beneath me. I would never join it. And if I found out about it, I would report it. I would do everything I could to stop it. I wouldn't condone it. I wouldn't participate in it. And people who do, they're just, if they had a soul, they sold it. If they didn't, you know that one could never manifest in people like that. If there's a chance for a soul to exist, and there must be, or what are we talking about? It will never manifest. They've gone past the pale. They've crossed the line. Metaphysically, whether or not there's a witness in the heavens or whatever. But I'll tell you what, they're miserable before they reach death. And now just imagine what happens if reality doesn't stop there. It had to start somewhere before someone was born, before the universe was even born. There had to be at least some form of a steady state going back. Time didn't begin in that way. Nothing begins absolutely out of nothing. That's one of the laws of physics. Anyway, so that's one of the rational laws that is the foundation of of science as such. And its variations include the laws of conservation of energy and mass and all these others. So it's also functional in all kinds of domains of practical science and even logic and mathematics. So basically, it was always there in some form. There's a certain luxury to existence. Its magnificence, its majesty, pre-exists entire universes. For we see universes begin, go through a process, and seem, in this case, to end, at least locally, and preferably at the rate they're going. Because there are things that are worth preserving even at great danger. Because to treat them in any other way would just be too low. Just be an insult. It'd be wrong. Would you really want to, for all the family-loving people of every, I don't care how you feel about me or anything I've said, just you love your family. Would you allow a serial murdering rapist to infiltrate your home and do what he likes with your family? Would you allow it? I know that your body might be healthy and have a long lifespan ahead of it, and many talents may you have, but wouldn't you want to put all that at dire risk if that's what it took to protect them? Wouldn't you want to? So I mean, there's just one example right there. There's some things life's not worth having if you would stand by and let that happen. Really isn't, and you damn well know it. So you think I'm doing this for my health? I have so many more healthful and happier and better things I could be doing, because I'm not well rewarded for my work. I'm well punished, I would say. All I know, though, is that when it comes down, when the final end comes, people will see it's not the end. It's the beginning. So be on the right side of that process for your own sake. If you're anywhere near the fence and you're on the right side of it, get further in. Bury yourself as deeply in the love of truth, justice, the virtues like honesty, and please don't wind other people about what you think of their egos and whether or not they should be humble, because you'll just sound like you're full of shit if they happen to know what they're talking about, and if they happen to know that you're just projecting your own defense mechanisms. Get over it. Leave your ego at the door. My ego is just fine. I can bring it with me everywhere I go. It's not going to cause any problems for me. I've disciplined myself throughout a long number of years in many ways and shaped myself so I could recognize reality for what it is and try to deal with it appropriately. That's what an ego is. When that's working well, you don't have to leave it at the door like you're some kind of metaphysical child that has to go to a guru's feet in order to have validation. Excuse me, that's not me. And it doesn't have to be you. Each person can judge for themselves to the best of their ability and seek advice if they feel like they can't get past a point. But if there's a point where they're being resistant and they're dense and they won't listen, or because the system is engineered so that they can't hear it, I have a duty to at least do my best to get it out there, because I just feel like I'm seeing frustration in these movements. People are not hitting these problems in the world at the right angle. And that's kind of frustrating for me, because I'd like to see the bad guys go down. I'd like to see corrupt people go down. I like to see people happily playing with their children in the park. I like to have fun, enjoy my hobbies, and I like everybody to have their freedoms and liberties and so on and so forth. There are ways to arrange for all these things within our technological means that would make the world paradisical. I do not like standing by and continuing to live in a body while watching corruption take place that's mocking everything I know better about. And then I see people fighting against it, and it looks like they're fighting an uphill battle in some ways, because they don't quite have, they're not quite tracking some essential features that catalyze the whole problem. They're not even shining a light on it. And they might know about it, and they might have some strategy for dealing with it that I don't know about. But I have my doubts, because the emotional responses to their that are represented in their frustration with things as they are, and in how they have not changed, and how people aren't catching on fast. They're not catching on fast enough, and we see things coming out of the woodwork that are good, not just evil, and all these other. It's like as if they don't see that can all be because there's a big stall put on it by forces that are not classically or conventionally understood, but yet are operative right now. Psychotronics is one of them. Do not underestimate that. Do not underestimate that, because everything else that's considered an influence over the way people as individuals and as societies think and operate, whether for their good or for their bad, operates to affect the brain through the body. Something that does that more directly with extreme scientific precision, and that is guided with a lot of heuristic feedback loops that are covertly operates, that people don't even know what's going on. I mean, first of all, you have the environment. It's very unethical, but you have the environment that's perfect for a psychological experiment, because people don't know, apparently, they're being observed. That's part of the reason they like to keep the panopticon semi-secret and semi-covert in some places. And of course, they like to have a baseline to compare that with, where everybody sees the cameras everywhere, and then they like to keep it secret in some places. But there's pinholes, smart dust, at a distance detectors that are very efficient, various other means that are not revealed to anyone. And I think they just like to study us like lab rats. So if you want to look at it from a very dark, if you want to look at it through that scanner darkly, then there's a way to rationalize and understand the phenomena as being so differentiated and sometimes not consistent, partial in some ways, or perhaps even just seems like it's toying with the populations. I mean, are they really, really worried? Are they really, really worried? Is Trump really going to come in there and zing them? Or is it possible that even though he might be sincere and genuine, they have enough firewalls set up that they actually think they could shut it down? They want to do it in a way that doesn't destabilize the way they want it to go down. So in other words, it might be on the edge of two possible worlds, where in fact they're overconfident and they think that with their multiple control grids they can game this and steer it into an outcome they want, but they might be very wrong. And it might be that they actually are genuinely scared that they are not able to do this, and there might be forces benign and transcendental to the situation aiding and abetting good people systematically within the system, because the real help is going to come when the systems, when evil systems of control are gone and done away with and people are truly free. When good people are truly free, then the job's done. That's the real help. I don't see this as a learning experience. I don't see this as a teaching tool. I don't buy into that theodicy that God's good and this is a necessary evil so that our souls can evolve, so that free will can be meaningful. Freedom just means the freedom to express your nature. And if it made you with a good nature in the first place, then it wouldn't be a moral issue. The moral issue is, why would he create a false alternative that only leads to hell and suffering? That's stupid. Doesn't even make sense. Why even invent pain? Why even have it? There's no need for any of that for an omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent being. But we don't have to get into that to make the point that, at least the way I see it, a whole hell of a lot less of that constitutes a perfection and an accomplishment of what I would think a beneficent, ideal condition would be, and hence a creator of it, and hence a God of that nature. Why would I want to settle for this bullshit and rationalize it as a teaching tool? I don't have time for that. It's not happening. That's not going there with me. Plus, if so, if it's to teach you to struggle against it, that means that evil was a real force in the universe that by being taught to struggle against it would better enable us to defeat it on down the line. That meant the ultimate goal was to defeat it. And I don't believe in a God or any other kind of rational or intelligent or meaningful being that creates something just to destroy it. A self-defeating kind of entity. That's stupid. And I will tell that God that I think that that's stupid. Say, you know, everybody else might think that's awesome and cool and wonderful and to your glory and it's a mystery and blah, 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 but I think that's pretty stupid and evil and cruel. And it's witnessed that it is not only when people don't fight against it, but when they do. Not only when they're naive, but when they're very well aware. Not only when they're ignorant, but when they're knowledgeable. Not only when they're evil, but when they're good. And so the mystery of the quotient is resolved by figuring out what kind of evil-minded jerk would even set up that situation. And frankly, that scenario logically overlaps for all of its form and content with just some sadistic other species or a sadistic parallel society that just likes to run amok over other people's lives, because once you've mastered matter, all that's left to master is the experiences had between people of power relationships, of dominance and submission. I'm sure that some like to fantasize that they're not like that. They have these benevolent unicorn types, but I'm sure that, you know, in their secret societies, the way they treat people that they capture, well, how do you think that they would rationalize their treatment of people that they've captured on a systematic level once they've weaponized culture and infrastructure to such a degree that that's the equivalent of taking you to their private dungeon, except it's open air? These are all, to me, proof taken as a whole that it's absurd to consider these evil conditions a learning tool or a classroom. Might be a necessary evil because it was unavoidable, even by God. But what are they saying if they try to rationalize it their way, except that he couldn't avoid it because it was the best and most rational thing for him to do? You don't really want to get it back into the Platonic dialogues, do you? Because this was covered by Socrates 2,400 or so years ago in the Euthyphro. Go read it. Read. And don't use Kindle. Someone asked me why. Well, because it's not a book. Physical books are what people read. They don't stare at one point on a screen at one angle with this light projecting directly into their eyes from it that's not even natural. I wouldn't recommend it. Get an actual physical book, read that. But I know they were being a troll and they were just trying to lure me into a false interaction, so I didn't respond. By the way, I know all the methodologies because I've studied the basics and the fundamentals and certain extended theories of psychology and social dynamics and psychological warfare. So what you think is pretty neat and cool when you're doing it, I'm seeing right through it and I think it looks stupid and it just makes you look like an evil asshole. It's called passive aggressiveness that's puffed up in a way that would be proportional to, say, the conditions of a Milgram's experiment. Basically, the schematics of people that do that are kind of like, oh, let's see, let's have all the design of a human being here and just take out everything that's meaningful, including a soul, a mind, a spirit, a conscience, and then let that thing run amok. That's not really hurting me unless I believe that there was actually supposed to be a person there. Do I believe that when I see the evidence that they're just a cyber troll or a paid street theater type troll or some useful idiot that's propped up like a meat prop in one of these offices where basically embezzlement schemes are run through like a look, if you want to live in that world and not even be aware that's what it is, that's foolish. It's just absurd. It's inane. It's a waste of consciousness and time. But if you want to try to solve the problems in the here and now and you don't think it's futile, get the whole picture, get every piece of the information, because they're all, of course, going to synergize with each other. There's no wasted effort by people who are involved in organized crime. If you study them carefully, they might make mistakes, they might fuck around, but every part of the operation is meant to synergize with every other part. They don't add things spuriously to ruin everything else they've already gotten put together. So if you leave one part out, you're not capturing the essence of what all the other parts are doing. Further, if you let one part remain protected, you reinforce the whole thing so that every other part you try to take down or even just study can't be taken down as easily, it can't be made sense of as easily, and you're just defeating your own purpose. So that's why I keep hammering that one point through. I calculate that in all probability the reason why it's not getting through to people partly is because there are internet whitelisting topologies that curve it around the people that need to get it, and so I'm forgiving about that. I don't accuse them of being shills. I don't accuse them of being in on it in some way, even though they could fold to be in on that, and that would be perfect and ideal for a system, and there is a possible world where that could happen, but I don't feel we're in that one. So I judge it to be because of the interstices of communication being being basically hijacked, and all the other factors which make it fully understandable why people wouldn't get to the point of being able to cognize and evaluate the magnitude of what's being done to them, because what's being done to them is specifically engineered to lead to that result, among others. So that's the current state of status praesens relative to everything that anyone familiar with my work by now well knows. I thoroughly go into in other forums and have been for years. I'm not confident it's getting out to a large enough audience. I'm not confident that it would even do much good at this point, because it's like looking at a necrosis that's taken over most of a body except for the heart. In some parts of the heart that it's still beating on one valve. It's still beating. It's maybe 3 valves, or does it have to use all 4? I don't recall. Maybe it's fluttering, and parts of the brain are shutting down because they're not being properly oxygenated. And I don't want to hate this being, but I hate the evil that's coursing through it and destroying it. And I love what it used to represent to me, and still does in my own life. And I despise people like Zen Gardner and all these other fake spiritual assholes that think they can judge me with their hypocritical denial and evasion. You're no good to anybody. I don't have to profess my love or my decency or my virtue to tell the truth about that. The substance of what I said should stand sufficient. And for the rest of you who are actually struggling against the thing that's trying to devour you, I wish you the best of luck. I hope that you stay true and sincere, stay safe, and just not only don't give up, but strive even harder. Strive even harder. Not just to capture the ideals you want to pursue, and not just to perceive accurately and act adequately toward the causes of defeating the things which would damage or destroy them, but both. Be both. pray and fight. Don't just do one. And put some effort into it.